Beck Weathers is a practicing anatomic pathologist at Columbia Hospital at Medical City, Dallas, Texas. A Georgia native, Griffin, Georgia, I found that out. Dr. Weathers eventually adopted Texas as his home. Dr. Weathers first became interested in climbing around 1985 on a family vacation in Colorado. Those initial day hikes in the Rockies gave birth to a growing interest in hiking and climbing. Fascinated by the goal of climbing the tallest mountains on each of the 7 continents, Dr. Weathers gradually pursued each of these peaks, leaving only Mount Everest for the spring of 1996. He describes his major motivation in climbing as a search for personal limits of endurance, mental toughness, and emotional strength. Following the Mount Everest tragedy on May 10, 1996, he has sought to rebuild his life. 4 months following the amputation of his hand, returned to work as a pathologist. Now, with the aid of assistants, he once again is fully engaged in his practice of medicine. His story was prominently featured in the #1 best-selling book by John Krakauer, I hope I said that correctly, It's Been There, and was turned into a major motion picture, Everest, starring Josh Brolin as Beck and Robin Wright as his wife. The movie hit theaters in 2015 and was an office action. Please, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Beck Weathers.
Hey. Thank you. Well, let me just start off today by saying how delighted I am to be here. Of course, I'm delighted to be anywhere, so maybe that takes away slightly from that sentiment, but I don't think so. I get asked sometimes about the movie, and my usual response to that is I just hope that I'm not as big a jerk as the guy in the movie. You'll notice I did not say I wasn't as big a jerk. I just said I hoped I wasn't. I was chatting with Stan a little bit before getting up here, and he was telling me about y'all and about all the good work that y'all do. And he said, you know, Beck, this is really an amazing group of individuals, and this may be one of the warmest, most empathetic groups that you'll ever have a chance to talk to. And I know that once you finish this talk, they're going to want to give you a nice warm hand. Yes, he's sick. Yeah. All right. Shall we begin? On the 10th of May, 1996, high in the death zone on Everest in a terrible storm, some 9 individuals going to perish. The following day, one of those individuals was quite literally granted a second chance at life. And that individual was myself. And this is the story of those people and those few days. It takes about a week to get there as you walk in as part of that acclimatization process. And as you do so, every once in a while, you're going to come around a turn in the trail, and there, off in the distance, is this enormous giant. And it thrusts its summit up, dwarfing everything that surrounds it, and blowing off the downstream side for a mile or a mile and a half is a plume of snow and ice that reminds you that this mountain summit at 29,000, now 35 feet, exists at an altitude that jet airliners normally fly. And that for almost all of the year, the jet stream, with its winds of 150, 200 miles an hour, is going to sit squarely down on the hill, and one time in the spring, and one time in the fall, they're just going to briefly lift off, provide you a window of opportunity so you can tag it, and then try to get back down alive. Ironically, though, by the time that you get to Everest base at 17,600 feet, you cannot see the mountain at all. It is completely hidden from your view. And kind of a climber's Shangri-La, but what lies before you, beginning right at the edge of the camp and going almost straight up for 2,000 feet, the great Khumbu Icefall, there to meet a precipice edge where, hidden from your view, gradually slopes away, rising another 2,000 feet. The Valley of the Western Khum will then be embraced by an amphitheater, a horseshoe, these big 8,000-meter mountains with Everest on the left, Lhotse in the middle, Nuptse on the right. And rising to the upper reaches is a 4,000-foot blue ice wall. And all of the snow and all of the ice that descends thereupon is going to flow as a river down that valley till it hits that precipice edge there to tumble the 2,000 feet to the glacier below. And the ice fall is made of blocks of ice the size of multi-story buildings, separated by crevasses, some so vast you cannot see the bottom. And the whole thing moves 3 to 4 feet a day. Now, that is a point of some concern to you. You're going to be standing inside for about 20 hours of climbing, and every once in a while, one of these blocks, or seracs, is just going to lean over. And as it does so, its thousands of tons of weight will just crash down that hill, instantly crushing anything beneath it. In fact, we were all too tragically reminded of in the spring of 2014 with the death of 16 Sherpa in the upper ice fall. If we were to take anyone from this room today, including myself, and were to instantly, magically transport you to that summit, you would have to deal with the medical fact that in the first few moments that you were there, you'd be unconscious. In the next few moments that you were there, you'd be dead. Your body simply will not withstand the enormous physiologic shock of being suddenly placed into such an oxygen-deprived environment, but you can do as we have done over the preceding weeks by starting all the way down and climbing up and all the way back down and up higher and back down, each time pushing that envelope. You basically say to your body, I am going to climb this thing, and I'm taking you with me. So get ready. By way of introduction, 2 groups are going to meet on that fateful day. Ours is headed by Rob Hall, who is a tall, gentle, humorous, enormously experienced climber out of New Zealand. He's backed up by Mike Groom, an Australian, and by young Andy Harris, who's going to be climbing and guiding for the first time on one of these big 8,000-meter mountains. If you were to go into any of these high-altitude camps, you would rapidly discover that this is not a beautiful body sport. In fact, we pretty much look like a bunch of homeless trying to find a subway. But Andy is the antithesis of that because he's a big, handsome, athletic kid who looks like he could play pro quarterback for any team in the NFL. So he's going to be our photo opportunity. And once you get past the level of the pro, the certified mountain monster, you get down to the level of the grunt. That's where I exist. As does John Krakauer. I think y'all know that John's written a pretty good book, Into Thin Air, chronicling this story through his eyes and voice. Actually, my wife Peach and I wrote our own book. Writing it wasn't all that hard, but when it came to naming it, I was seriously bereft in the idea department. It had not entirely escaped my attention that when John released Into Thin Air, he seriously shifted his tax bracket. So I thought I'd fall back on my college skills, that is plagiarism. And I was going to steal some of John's thunder. And so in about 2-point type on the bottom of the book, they'd say, this book was written by Beck Weathers, who's a friend of John Krakauer. By the time you got home and realized you'd been had, you'd be too embarrassed to bring it back. John's first book was Into the Wild. He followed that up with Into Thin Air. So we decided we'd call ours Into the ICU, with the emphasis on that icy part. Also in our group, we have Yasuko Namba. She is a 47-year-old Japanese female climber who on this outing will become the oldest woman to summit Everest, the second Japanese woman to do so, and the first Japanese woman to complete that 7 summits quest. For this, she will pay an enormous price. As will Doug Hansen, 46-year-old postal worker from Seattle. And rounding up our cast of characters, the baby of our group, Stuart Hutchison, he's 35, Canadian cardiologist. We get pretty old pretty fast after that. John's next, he's 42. Then we're 46, 47, 49, 53, 53, 56. This crowd is old enough to apply for the AARP discount. I don't think I ever got a check back, but I can go out to the mailbox occasionally and look. You don't know. The other team is headed by Scott Fisher. Now, Scott is a charismatic, ponytailed, Hollywood kind of guy, and he runs a group called Mountain Madness, which pretty much sums up Scott's idea of how you climb. And he's backed up with Neil Heidelman, who's not normally a guide, but is an aerospace engineer, as well as by Anatoly Nikolaevich Bukrev, a Russian, one of the world's premier high-altitude climbers, and a physical force. In their grunt section, we have Sandy Hill Pittman. Now, Sandy is a New York socialite, and she goes to Everest that year seeking fame and achieving notoriety. There is a difference. You've got to be careful that for which you seek, because you may get it. Tim Madsen, climber and boyfriend of one of my favorite people, Charlotte Fox. Now, Charlotte is a big, strong, raw bone strapping, handsome gal who gives a lie to the idea that high-altitude mountaineering is strictly a male-dominated, adrenaline-driven macho sport. I generally say at this point that Charlotte could easily clean this room in a fair bar fight. But in deference to the august nature of this group, she could easily clean this room in a fair wine and cheese fight. We're going to begin our story on the 9th of May. We're halfway up that 4,000-foot wall at 24,000 feet. And because there is no place which is flat upon which you can place a tent, you take an axe and you carve out a platform big enough to put the tent upon it so you can rest that night, remembering a couple of fairly simple rules, one of which is you don't sleepwalk, and the other is that when you get up, the very first thing you got to do without fail is to put the 12 knives back on each foot, the crampons. They're going to stick you to this hill. Failure to do so can be somewhat catastrophic. As one of the Taiwanese fellows is going to get to learn that morning, he gets out of his tent in his inner boots, takes 2 steps to relieve himself, then goes down that hill into a crevasse leading to his death. Fortunately, we didn't know it, so it didn't affect our spirits. Our plan that day was pretty simple. We're going to get up with the sun, start climbing, climb all day to get to the high camp late that afternoon, rest 3 or 4 hours, get back up, start climbing again, climb all through the night, through the next day, to hit the summit by noon, but absolutely no later than 2. And this is a point which has been drilled into you. Absolutely no later than 2, because if you're not moving fast enough to get there by 2, you are not moving fast enough to get back down before darkness traps you on the mountain. And as you begin to ascend into the death zone, that part of the mountain above 25,000 feet, the stresses on your body are incredible. You're burning 12,000 calories a day. This means you're going to drop 3 pounds of solid body weight every day that you're up there. And water weight or Jenny Craig weight. I lost 30 pounds the last couple of weeks. That's not considered to be excessive. The thought of food is completely repugnant to you. And if you are able to force yourself to put food in your mouth, chew it, and swallow it, your body will not digest it. The work of breathing is so great. You blow off up to 6 liters of water a day through respiration alone, and the effort it takes to melt ice back down into water at low barometric pressures is such that you never catch up, and you are constantly dehydrated. You no longer can sleep. The air hunger, the gasping, the drive to breathe is so great. You can rest, but you can never sleep. We get to the high camp late that afternoon. It's extremely cold. The wind is blowing very hard. And at some visceral level, I'm grateful, because I know we can't climb in these conditions, and I am hammered. And I think to myself, if I can just rest tonight, I am bound to feel better tomorrow than I feel right now. Intellectually, I know this is completely false, because the whole point of the moment is to arrive here with just enough left to hit it and then get out of this place. Every second that you are up there, your body is literally dying beneath you. The high camp on Everest exists at 26,000 feet in a saddle or a col that lies between Everest and Lhotse. It's the South Col, same route that Hillary took in '53. And of course, the mountain hadn't changed at all. And because of the shape of this narrow area, those jet stream winds that normally exist are compressed as they funnel through here, and it leaves a boilerplate of rock and ice. And the only thing that exists year to year are the discarded canisters of oxygen and the scattered bodies of the climbers who preceded you. Makes it pretty easy to give directions. Go up that third body on the left, shoot a right and go over. You're not apt to get lost. We lie down in the tents, and Mother Nature, being the perverse gal that she is, in about 3 hours causes those winds to completely cease. And Rob sticks his head in the tent and says, guys, saddle up. We're going for it. And I start to get my little things together, and I think, well, maybe I have timed this okay. Yeah, I feel pretty crummy, but I feel better than I thought I was going to feel. But I am concerned, and it turns out prophetically so. There are two members of our group. In the sleeping bag to my immediate left is Doug. He looks like somebody's taken that axe and just worked him over. He's been sick. He's not been climbing well. And even more so than the rest of us, he's not been feeding and watering and resting the machine that has to carry you up there. Doug had climbed this same hill the year before with Rob, and he got within 300 vertical feet of that summit, and he had to be turned around. And he came back this year vowing that no one is going to turn him around again. Going to any summit is optional. Getting back down is mandatory. And one of the things you got to know, really as a moral obligation to those with whom you climb, is with this step. How much do I have left? With this step. Can I still turn and get back down to safety? I didn't think Doug knew it, and frankly, I didn't think he cared. The other individual for whom I was concerned was Yasko. She is an itty-bitty waif of a person. She cannot weigh more than 90 pounds dripping wet. And even though she is an individual of enormous drive, the gear that you carry up there weighs exactly the same. Whether you weigh that 90 pounds, you weigh 200 pounds, and I just didn't think that little tiny body of hers had the horses to cash the checks her mind was writing. We get out of the tents. We put on our oxygen masks. These are MiG fighter pilot masks. So we stand around looking like a bunch of deranged fighter pilots. You got on these enormous down suits, the kind of thing your mom sends you out to play in the snow. You can't do much more than waddle back and forth. But that night, as we begin to move across the flat expanse of the col leading to the summit face, it is an exquisite evening. The wind is absolutely still. It's about 10 below zero, which is really very warm for a big mountain. And because there is no man-made light anywhere, the stars above you shine with such an incredible brilliance that you can see them reflected in that cold blue ice beneath your feet, and they are so close to you that you can just reach up, pluck them one at a time from the heavens, place them in your pocket, and save them for later. And as you begin to move, your body assumes that slow, rhythmic, almost metronome-like fashion of movement, which is ingrained between the frame of your being to the years of prior climbing. With each step, those knives bite into that surface with a distinctive and as you move and you shift your weight in the cold, the metal in your boots, in your pack, squeak in response. And you start across, start up the summit face, and there's just nothing to it. It's just straight up. And all you got to do is step. And rest. And step. And rest. Hour after hour after endless hour. And about halfway up the face, you've got to move in a traverse to the left, and this is an inherently more dangerous kind of move in mountaineering. It's harder to protect a traverse. You've got to be able to see where you're putting your feet. When I get here, I realize I can't see the face of this mountain at all. Some year and a half before, I had my eyes operated on in Dallas, radial keratotomy done, so that I would be safer in the mountains. mountain weather and eyeglasses simply do not mix at all. But unbeknownst to me and virtually every ophthalmologist in this country, there are individuals, if you do that, and then take them to extreme altitude, the shape of the front of their eye changes dramatically, they get huge vision shifts, and they go effectively blind. But I'm not worried about it, because I know coming to me in the next couple of hours is a solution to this problem, which is the sun that exists on one of these mountains is not a sun you have ever seen before. It is an enormous, radiant, powerful ball of light and energy so great it will burn the inside of your mouth. It will burn the inside of your nose. You take off those protective lenses, and with moments your retinas are seared to total blindness. And I know that once that sun is fully out, even behind those jet black lenses, my pupils are going to go down to a pinpoint. And when they do so, everything's going to be infinitely in focus. It's just like the pinhole cameras some of us had as kids. I know it's going to happen. But I am forced to stand and wait and go from fourth in line of some 30-something climbers to absolutely dead last while everybody traipses past me. It's not unpleasant. Actually, it's kind of social. You get a chance to see some folks you hadn't seen in a while. It's always, hey, Ed, how's the wife and kids? And you're pretty much handshaking and networking and exchanging business cards and acting like the Walmart greeter. Till the sun begins to light that face. You can see where to put your feet. You take the front point knives, you dig them into the hill, you move across, you achieve the vertical line, and you go up to the summit ridge. By the time I get there, my right eye is completely blurred, which means that I don't have any depth perception. Not good in this environment. My left eye, a little blurry, but it's basically okay, but I know I can't climb above this point and my vision improves. I believe it will. But I'm forced to go to Rob and tell him this whole sad tale. And I say, Rob, you guys go ahead and boogie on up the hill, and at the point that I can see, I'll just wander up after you. Beck, I don't like that idea. You got 30 minutes. If you can see in 30 minutes, climb on. If you can't see in 30 minutes, so I don't want you climbing. And even though it has taken me years of work to reach this moment, I can understand the wisdom of that decision. So I say, okay, I'll accept that. And then I do something really stupid. If I can't see in that 30-minute window you give me, at the point that I can, I'm just going to head down to the high camp. But I don't like that any better than the last one you just had. Because if I come down off the top and you're not standing here, I'm not going to have any idea whether you've gone safely down to that camp. You're just gone for an 8,000-foot whipper. I want you to promise me, and I am serious about this, I want you to promise me that you're going to stay here till I come back. And I said, Rob, cross my heart, hope to die, I'm sticking. It never once crossed my mind that he would never come back. I waited through that morning, and it was a glorious day. A cloudless sky, the wind is still, this enormous cathedral of mountains stretching as far as the eye can see, the curvature of the earth visible beneath your feet. By noon, 3 climbers out of our group began to descend toward me. There's been a slowdown, a bottleneck on the uppermost reaches. They realize there is no way they can hit that summit by 2. They make the decision to come down, and as they come to me, they say, come down with us. Okay. I have really put myself in a box. We have no radio. I have no way to tell Hall that I've left. It's as if I've never honored that commitment at all. I just don't think I can do that. And they say goodbye. That would turn out to be the single worst decision that I'd make that day, because what never crossed my mind was what was going to happen when the sun started to go back down, the pupils open back up, and you go blind. I expected them back by 3. It came, it went, as then 4, then 5. Now the mountain is starting to put itself to bed. It is not threatening. It does what it does every day. The light has gone flat. The temperature is beginning to drop, the wind to pick up, the snow to move, and I realize I have stayed too long at the party, and I am trapped. Another half hour goes by, and here comes Mike, and he's got Yaska with him, but she's so tired she can barely stand. She looks like a walking corpse. At the same time, here comes Neil, and he's got some of the Fisher crowd with him, so we take Yasko and hand her off to Neil, and Mike short ropes me, which is exactly what it sounds like. You take about 20 feet worth of rope tied around the waist of the down climber, and 20 feet back is Mike. And that's going to add his stance and stability to mine. If you want to get yourself killed on a mountain, you do it going down, not going up. It's a whole lot more dangerous. It's a good thing we do this, because since I can't see, I move, commit, and plant my weight, what I believe to be solid, and I step instead on nothing but air. I come flipping right off the face. The rope snaps taut, pulls Mike off his feet. We both start to slide down the face together. You take the axes, you jam them in the hill. You roll your body weight up on top of them to arrest the fall. We'll do this another 2 or 3 times before we get all the way down, and he will later describe this as somewhat unnerving. But except for some tears in the down suit and a whole lot of wounded pride. No harm, no foul. We get down to the call, and we know we are home free. There is no way that another 30, maybe 45 minutes of the absolute outside of easy traverse, we're going to be in those tents, in those sleeping bags, drinking hot tea and putting the day to bed. You cannot see the camp, but it is palpably close. It's just right over there. And as you begin to move across to finish that day, you hear what begins behind you as a low growl, a sound that moves, surrounds, crescendos till it sounds like a squadron of 747s with their engines on absolute full. You see these clouds below you on the face. They rise up, they hit the edge, and a wall of white rolls across. The space of 2 or 3 minutes, you are standing in a complete whiteout. You no longer can see your feet. You put your hand out in front of you, it disappears. The person standing next to you is no longer there. On the disembodied headlamps floating in a wall of white, I grab hold of Mike's arm. He's my eyes. I dare not lose contact with him. The temperature is rapidly plunging. It is quickly 30 below zero. Inside the tents that night, they were measured in excess of 50 below. These are winds above 70 knots, wind chills way beyond 100 below zero, and it is incredibly cold. We now have to feel the slope of this hill to discern where the camp is that we no longer can see. And we move like a bunch of first graders trying to play soccer, nobody wanting to be separated one from the other, and you turn, and that's not it. And you turn again, and that's not it. In the space of a few moments, you're so turned around, you don't have any idea what direction you're facing. The only thing that exists is a maelstrom of wind and noise and ice and cold. But you continue to move, and the hair on the back of Neil's neck stands up. I don't know if this is intuition, experience, all of the above. But he says, something is wrong here. We're stopping. Good decision. We're now 25 yards from the 7,000-foot vertical plunge off the Kanshung face. The ice is rapidly downsloping. And a few more paces, the whole group simply would have skidded right off the hill. But as you stop, the other thing that stops is the furnace that keeps you alive. The only way you stay warm up there is through constant, unremitting, unrelenting, never-ending work. To stand is to freeze to death. And I know it's beginning to happen. I no longer can feel or move my right arm. This is not that uncommon in extremely cold conditions. Cure for it's pretty simple. You take off 2 of the 3 gloves you got on that side, take your arm, stick it up underneath your coat against the skin of your chest. When you can move your hand again, you know it's okay. Take it back out, put the gloves back on, go about your business. But even though I have been in extremely cold places before, as I pull those outer gloves off, I felt something that I have never felt before. Even beneath that third expedition weight glove, the skin on my hand, on my arm, froze solid as a wave of ascending pain, and it so startled me that I loosened a grip in my glove in my left hand, went off into outer space just that fast. I've got another pair of gloves exactly like it. On the pack on my back, they might as well be on the face of the moon. There is no way you can take that pack off, put it down, and rummage through it. This wind is strong enough to pick you up and throw you. For one moment, clouds overhead open up, and you can see directly overhead the Big Dipper, and one of the group yells out, "I've seen the stars. I know where the camp is." We rapidly formulate a plan which is pretty simple. That is, the strongest amongst us are going to make a high-speed run in the direction we believe the camp to exist, get help, come back, and bring the others in. I talk about this with Mike. I can walk okay, I just can't see. And I've got to hold on to his arm, and I'm going to slow him down. He's one of the stronger guys up there, so I agree to remain. By this time, Charlotte, Sandy, Yasko can't walk. So we're the four who remain. They begin to move from us. And Tim says, "You guys can go, but I am not going to leave Charlotte here." And I got to tell you, that takes an enormous amount of guts to voluntarily place yourself in a storm like that, knowing that may be a self-imposed death sentence. They move from us. We lie down on the ice, back to back, belly to belly, trying to get out of that wind, and you turn to the person next to you and you yell at them. You hit them. You kick them. Anything to remain awake. Because one thing that every mountaineer knows, it is a given, a truth, a fact, an icon, that if you allow yourself to be taken down by that cold, it is a one-way ticket. There's no way to put a heat source upon you to bring you back. Your core temperature will plunge until your heart stops. We continue to struggle. Now, the pain of the cold is entirely through your body. And Charlotte says, "I don't care anymore. All I want to do is die quickly." Tim tells her, "Wrong answer, Charlotte. Move your legs, move your hands. Come on." Now, Sandy does something that makes a heck of a lot of sense to me, because she becomes completely and utterly hysterical. "I don't want to die. I don't want to die. My hands are freezing. My face is freezing. I don't want to die." I didn't say anything, in large part because she was covering it pretty well. She certainly was expressing my sentiments. The other individual who was silent was Yasko. And that is a point which has haunted me all this time. She was exhausted and she was terrified, and I don't even know that she knew where she was. But as they started to move from us, she desperately clung to Neil's arm. And he had to take his hand and strip hers so he could walk away from us. We continue to struggle. And as I do so, I realize I'm not so cold anymore. And even in my befuddled state, I know this is not a good thing. And try, though I do, slowly, gently, inexorably, the cold moves through you and darkness claims you. By the time they get back to camp, It is all they can do to crawl on their hands and knees across the threshold of those tents. They're too exhausted to stand up. They're not coming back, the Sherpa won't, and there's not going to be any rescue. That day, Anatoly had forsaken his duties as a guide. He'd climbed for himself, by himself, without oxygen, gone straight up, straight back down. He didn't say hi, bye, or kiss my grits to anybody. He's been in his tent the last couple of hours recovering. If that's where his story ended, the climbing community would have stripped the flesh off of his bones. They are not a particularly forgiving bunch. But he did that night what no one else could or would. Alone, he went into that storm 3 times, finding no one in the first 2 attempts, and the third locating our little huddle by the face, where he would then bring in each of the 3 Fisher climbers and leave the 2 Holt climbers. He's told at least 3 stories of what occurred in that encounter, and I believe all of them, because it really doesn't matter. By saving those 3 people who otherwise surely would have died, Anatoly redeemed himself and became a hero. I think that many of you know that he will subsequently perish in an avalanche on Annapurna on Christmas Day. As a sidebar to this story, because I think it is an interesting study in people, choices, morality, Doug that day was climbing poorly. He went past the 2 o'clock, the 3 o'clock, the 4 o'clock. I don't know why he did it. I don't know why Rob let him do it. But the year before, when he came so close, he looked good going up. But when he turned, he lost it. And he had to be helped down. Your body doesn't carry you up there. Your mind does. Your body has been exhausted countless hours ago, and it is only through will and focus and drive and determination do you command your body to move. And if you lose that, your body is a dead and worthless thing beneath you. This year, Doug made it all the way to the summit, but as he turned, he did exactly the same thing again. And that's all he had. That is all he brought with him. Now, Rob's got a heck of a problem on his hands. He cannot rescue Doug. He cannot get Doug down from this place. He can yell at him, he can encourage him, he can stay with him, but he cannot do it for him. If he leaves Doug, Doug is dead. If he stays with him, they both are probably going to die. He gets on the radio, he calls down to base, and they talk about this. And they say, Rob, I know this is hard, but you can't save him. Save yourself. It comes as no surprise to those of us who knew him to know he could ever do that. And face himself again as a human being. He was quite literally damned if he did, and doomed if he did not. He gets back on the radio and says, guys, we're in desperate trouble. And bless his sweet young heart, young Andy, about a quarter of the way down, he's pretty much gone. He hears it. And he once again turns, and he slowly labors his way back up that hill. He gets the cached oxygen, carries it all the way back to them, and the next moment's trying to descend exhausted, Andy will fall to his death. That night, trying to cross the knife edge that separates the north from the south summits, Doug is going to peel off. And Rob will slowly freeze to death over the next 24 hours in full view of the world. He survived that night. But the next day, his darkness began to descend, and there was no longer any hope. They contacted his wife, Jan. in New Zealand, pregnant at 7 months with their first child. And they held that satellite phone up to the radio, and everyone on that mountain with a radio bore silent witness to their last moments together. They named their child. She to him, Rob, hold on. We'll get to you. I don't care how you come back to me. I'll take care of you. He to her, sleep well, my darling. I'll be okay. And both of them knowing exactly what lay ahead. And when those moments had passed, Rob no longer had to be strong. And he didn't know the radio was still on, and you could hear him quietly weeping as he had to face his own imminent death. The following morning, storm abated somewhat. Winds dropped to about 30 knots. And Stuart gets out of the tent, and along with 3 Sherpa, he comes over to find our bodies. Yasko and I lie next to each other, largely buried in snow and ice, and he moves first to her. And he reaches down, he grabs her by the coat, he pulls her up. She has a 3-inch thick layer of ice across her face, a mask which he peels back, and her skin is porcelain. Her eyes are dilated, but she is still breathing. He moves to me, pulls me up, cleans the ice out of my eyes, off of my beard so he can stare into my face, and I, like Yasko, am barely clinging to life. He would later say he had never seen a human being so close to death and still breathing, and coming from a cardiologist, I would accept that at face value. What do you do? He turned to the lead Sherpa, and the answer really was quite simple. You leave them. Every mountaineer knows that once you go into hyperthermic coma in the high mountains, you never, ever, ever wake up. They are going to die anyway. It will be more merciful to leave them. And if we take them back, it will only endanger our lives. They move from us. I don't begrudge that decision on my own behalf, but how much would it have taken to take Yasko back? She was so tiny. At least she could have died in the tent, surrounded by people, and not alone on the ice. They get back to camp, and they tell them we're dead. Radio down to base, satellite link, and a warm, beautiful spring, sunny Saturday morning in Dallas, Texas. The phone in our house rings. Peach answers, and they tell her that Beck has been killed descending from the summit ridge. She asks them, is there any hope? No, I'm sorry. There's been a positive body identification. I'm sorry. She then must go and awaken our 2 children and tell them that their father will never come home again. That afternoon, 22 hours in the storm, 15 hours frozen face down on the ice, a miracle occurred, and that miracle, simply stated, was that I opened my eyes. That's it. I opened my eyes. Not that I would stand and struggle alone back to the high camp, and the next day I would stand again and walk the 4,000 vertical feet down that blue ice wall. The next day the world's highest helicopter rescue would occur. None of those big things. I was given a chance to try. And I lay there warm, comfortable, in my own bed, the light streaming to me through the window. And as I awakened, directly in front of my face is my gloveless dead hand, a gray, marble, lifeless thing, and I took it and I hit it on the ice in front of me. It bounced off, make a sound like a block of wood, and had the marvelous effect of focusing my attention and telling me I am not in my own bed. I am somewhere on that mountain. I don't know where. And I know innately the cavalry's not coming, because if they were going to be there, they already would have been there. And I can see before me as clearly as I see you, my family, and I knew that if I did not stand, I would spend an eternity on this spot. I struggled to my feet, took off the pack, discarded it along with the axe. One-shot deal. If I don't make that camp, I'm not going to need them, and they're going to slow me down. That moment, both symbolically and very much in reality, those were the last things I owned on this earth. Someone that night had yelled above the storm, "What direction does the wind blow over the high camp?" And the answer was, if the wind hadn't shifted at all. The wind blows up the face, across the camp, across the call, which would mean, if the wind hadn't shifted at all, the camp ought to be somewhere upwind. And I decided that I would face into that wind because it was as good as the 359 other choices I had. And I would walk into it. If I fell down, I would get up. If I fell down again, I would get up. And I would keep walking until I walked into that camp, fell down, and could not stand, or I walked off the face of that mountain. I began that journey. Both of my hands were completely frozen. My face had been destroyed by the cold. I was profoundly hypothermic. I had not eaten in 3 days. I had no water in 2 days. I was lost, and I was almost completely blind. A lesser person could be discouraged. But you continue to move in that oh-so-familiar fashion. And as those moments pass, I realize that I am not going to get through this alive. And I look back with lucid recall, because the thing that so surprised me was that I was not at all frightened. And I am not a particularly brave individual. And I would have thought, having to come to grips with that moment, that I'd be terrified, but that is not what I felt at all. Rather, there was an enormous, overwhelming, encompassing sense of melancholy. That I would not say goodbye. That I would never again say I love you to my wife. That I would never again hold my children was just not acceptable. I tell you what you don't think about. You do not say to yourself, if only I bought that Mercedes I had my eye on. Woo! Wow! Be a happy camper. And if I had one more plaque, certificate of appreciation on my love me wall attesting to the fact that I am indeed a total stud muffin, this would be a lot easier. But you continue to move, and it's getting awfully close now because things are really moving around on me, and I see these two odd blue rocks in front of me, and the thought flashes through my mind, those might be the tents. And as quickly as I think that, I say to myself, don't do that. Because when you walk up to them and they're nothing but rocks, you may be discouraged, you may stop, and you cannot do that. You're going to walk up to them, you're going to walk right past them, it makes no difference. And I get within 100 feet of my odd blue rocks, and Todd Burleson stands up, and he looks at me. This thing just come to him out of the mist. He doesn't recognize me. My face is so blackened and distorted, but he does come to me, takes me by the arm to the first tent. It's Scott's tent. They know he's dead and he's not going to need it. Placed me in 2 sleeping bags, hot water bottles under each arm, shot of steroids in the leg, and they call down to the base camp doctor and say, "You are not going to believe what just walked into this camp." And the response back is, "That's fascinating, but it changes nothing. He's going to die. Don't bring him down." Fortunately, they didn't tell me that. They called up Peach and they told her that I was not as dead as they thought I was. But I am critically injured. Now, they're trying to tell her one thing, but what she hears is an entirely different thing. They do that night, place me alone in that tent to finish the work that needs to be done. And the storm comes back in with the same ferocity as the night before, and because the tent is designed to give before the force of the wind rather than be ripped asunder as those gusts come in, it presses on your chest, on your face so hard you can't breathe until you roll onto your side and leaves a small space in front of your face. My right hand, my right forearm start to swell at the level of a wristwatch that I'm wearing, which I try desperately to bite off. But I will tell you, Seiko makes a darn good watch band. And I was completely ineffectual. Doors on the tent blow out. It fills with snow. I come out of the bags, and I am once again in the storm. The following morning, everybody in the camp leaves. There are but 3 people remaining when I hear a noise outside. "Hello? Anybody out there?" And John Krakauer comes over, looks in, his jaw drops down to the middle of his chest. And I said, "John, if you don't mind, would you ask Pete Athens, there's a guy up there, if he can step over here, I'd kind of like to talk to him." Pete comes over, looks in, and I am in fact still alive. I'm fully dressed, got the boots on, you don't take them off, your feet swell so much you can't get back into them, so it's a fairly simple thing. Stand up, put the 12 knives back on each foot, drink 2 liters of tea, and with Pete and Todd's help and a quarter of the way down, the help of the IMAX film crew, my home movie guys, we walked that 4,000 vertical feet down into Camp 2 where they dress my hands. And as they do so, we hear a rumor of a helicopter rescue. Now, to those of us there, those of us in the know, this is a joke. Ain't happened, ain't ever gonna happen. The lowest camp in this mountain is above the ceiling of their helicopter. The air is so thin they simply fall out of the air. We know that. But nobody told Peach. And because she did not know it could not be done, she did it. Along with a bunch of North Dallas power moms, any one of whom can run a Fortune 500 company out of their kitchen, they proceed to call everybody in the United States. If you didn't personally receive a phone call, you weren't home. You had your machine turned off. And in so doing, they enlist the aid of Kay Bailey Hutchison and Tom Daschle in one of those rare bipartisan moments talked about but never seen. They light a fire under the State Department, who contacts a fine young man in the embassy in Kathmandu, David Shinstead, who works with a beautiful Nepalese woman, Inu KC. And the KC stands for Khas Chetri. And this is the warrior caste of Nepal, and this is something they take very seriously. And she told him, "I know a man who believes that he has a brave heart, but he has never been sufficiently challenged to know if this is true, and I will ask him." And they went to Lieutenant Colonel Madan, KC. Well, as it turned this down, yes, completely foolhardy. He said, "I will do this thing. I will rescue the Beck." And we get up at 5:30 in the morning to walk the 2,000 vertical feet down the valley. We come to the precipice edge. Radio comes alive. Helicopter's here. He's going to try it. He's here for Weathers. One climber only, get ready. And we received this message coming down the valley toward us as a group of Sherpa, and they're dragging something between them. And the thing they're dragging between them is Makalu Gao. He's a Taiwanese climber. His feet have been destroyed, and he can't stand. And we've got a problem. We talk about this, and I tell them I can't get on that helicopter. That decision was not made because it was the right thing to do, which I think it was. It was made rather because I didn't want to ask myself that question every day for the rest of my life. Price was too dear. Helicopter rises into view, moves up the valley, begins to descend toward us, and then just disappears off the face. And I think this guy is not as stupid as I think he is, because it's a supremely dumb idea. If he puts this machine down here for any reason and can't take it off, he's a dead man. He's got to know that. And he does know it. He's not a climber. He doesn't have the clothing, the equipment, the skills, the experience, and he's going to be standing above 2,000 of the most vicious feet of real estate on this planet. And at this altitude, the altitude alone can kill you before you can get out of there. But once again, helicopter rises into view. This time it is one lone man. He moves up the valley with slow, deliberate movement and delicate precision. He lays those skids on the surface. He does not land. He does not let the weight of this machine descend. He has no idea whether this is solid or chiffon over air. You never know when you're standing up there whether you're standing above a crevasse. The power is full on. His hands are frozen on the controls. It does not look left or right. It changes your depth perception. We grab Makalu like a sack of potatoes. We take him over there, and we throw him in the back, slam the door, the tail comes up. It does not rise, but it does move toward that edge where it will then plunge out of sight, as does my heart. He's not coming back. I've done a lot of stupid things in my life. One time that I wouldn't do a second time. And for him, this clearly was in that category. We stood there 5, 10 minutes. We didn't say anything because there just wasn't anything to say. And then I heard the most beautiful sound I have ever heard in my entire life. That choo, 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 that distinctive chop of the helicopter. And long before you can see it, you can hear it as it claws its way up that face. Rising again, that same lone man, he moves up the valley with greater authority, but with the same delicate precision. He lays those skids on the surface, and I am not waiting. I hot-footed over there, dive in the back, door slams shut, tail comes up, and once again we're moving toward that precipice edge where he takes this machine, screaming vertically down that face, the blades whipping around above you, trying to grab hold, which is air and cold and heavy and ditch provide lift. It is alive beneath you. It presses into your spine and pulls you back into the air, and you know that you are safe. He takes the machine, puts it down at base. We get Makalu, put him back on, get the co-pilot, put him back on, get all the gear stripped off this machine, put it back on. When he comes up to get me, he's flying on 15 minutes of fuel to make this machine absolutely bone dry. And I will tell you, this man will never have to wonder again whether he has a brave heart. He is to me the most extraordinary person in this story. He doesn't know me. He doesn't know my family. And he has a family for whom he is the sole responsible individual. We are separated by language, by culture, by religion, by the entire breadth of this world. But bound together by a bond of common humanity. You learn a variety of lessons from such an experience. One of the things that makes this story somewhat interesting is the common quality of the narrator. I am not a person of any special gifts or strengths. I am in the wrong place at the wrong time, and except for Walter Mitty dreams, I am an entirely ordinary individual, and we are all of the same clay. And if I can survive that which is unsurvivable, so can you. There exists within each of us an enormous well of strength. If you will but believe it and reach out and grasp it, embrace it and use it, if you're going to come through something like this, you have got to have within your life an anchor. It can be your friends, it can be your God, it can be as it was for me and is my family. I learned that day that miracles do occur. And in fact, I think they occur pretty commonly. But if they're not the kind of miracle that reaches out and grabs you by the lapels and shakes you so hard your teeth come loose, it's not big enough to be a miracle. But my miracle was that I opened my eyes. Is that really any different than what you did this morning? Did you understand that? Do you know why you were granted one more day of life's most precious gift? One of the things that happens to us as we age, become more mature, is we lose that sense of wonder and awe and astonishment at life. It's just always there. And the only time that you get to see it again is through the eyes of your own children when they see life for the very first time and you say, yes, I remember that. That's how it was. And then it's gone. I get to see that every single day, and it is an exquisite treasure. The fellows that put me back together, not much of this is original equipment, remark, hey, you still got some scars there, and we can buff those out of there, and you'll never see them again. And I say, oh, no, you're not. I want to get up every day for the rest of my life. I want to look into that mirror, and I want to be reminded of the lessons I've learned because I opened my eyes to more than that mountain. I saw my own future, and I didn't like it. The path that I had chosen led to the same lonely end, whether it was at that moment on the mountain or decades hence. The relentless pursuit of success, goals, ambition, without balance in my life was driving out of my life that which was most precious to me. I traded my hands for my family and my future, and it is a bargain I readily accept. I have traveled the whole world over seeking that which would fulfill me, make me whole, and give me peace. And it was in my own backyard. In the final analysis, that which matters, really the only thing that matters, are the people you hold in your heart. And those who hold you in theirs. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Absolutely.
No doubt. Thanks. Awesome.
Lose these.